Hey, everyone. So just wanted to give you a brief rundown on Disputifier and the interface itself, so you guys can get more information on what the dashboard and everything else in Disputifier has to offer. So first things first, this is actually a demo store that I'm using. You would actually be able to see um, multiple different things technically in the same place, some of which might become a little bit confusing, but some of it is literally at your fingertips. The Spitifier wants to ensure that everything is crystal clear when it comes to your overall coverage, when it comes to your win ratios, and even when it comes to you paying Disputifier, every week or based on your invoices. So let's dive into this. So first things here is your main dashboard, which is the home page. You can actually see or hover on top of this section and see your a breakdown of your costs. And then there's obviously a different section that you can dive into further to see how much you're paying to Spitifier, what services you're enrolled in, what you can activate, deactivate, etc., etc. So other than this section here, if you go into settings, you go into plan and billing, you will actually see everything that you're signed up for. You would actually see a breakdown of all of your charges right here. And these charges are obviously exportable as well. So you could actually export these charges for record keeping purposes. Your finance teams probably want to keep a record of what you're paying a certain app. You could do that. And then secondly, some Shopify stores, some merchants are paying directly through Shopify. So that's more than welcome as well. It's fine to go ahead and pay through Shopify, but the thing here is that those invoices would be governed by by your billing cycle that you have in Shopify. So it might be a daily cycle, it might be a weekly cycle. So technically, if these alerts came in or this alert came in on the 11th, that doesn't necessarily always mean that you will pay for this on the 12th, right? Or that wouldn't mean that you pay for this on the 13th. Chances are that you might end up paying for this on the 15th or 16th, depending on when Shopify get around to it. There's also certain merchants that prefer adding a payment method like a card or ACH payments on file. And we welcome that as well, because that sort of streamlines the whole billing for us and for the merchant. We charge those merchants every Friday. So we send an invoice every Friday, or if Friday is a holiday in the US, we charge them the following Monday, right? If you want to make a switch, you could actually switch that right here by clicking. You can log into the billing portal and you could actually add in your payment method on file, or you could reach out to our support team that will send you a link over for you to actually enroll with, sign up through your card or get paid, have your deductions through your card or through ACH, whatever is preferable there. So going back to the dashboard, um, if you're somebody or if you're a merchant where we're responding to chargebacks as well, you will actually be able to see your win ratio right here within this section. You can actually see the amount of chargebacks that we've responded to, and here's a ton of different FAQs. Here's the alert, like a few graphs that will show you the alert and chargeback percentage. You can actually see your dispute ratio here. This is obviously a demo store, so it's not activated. And you can also see fraud ratio, which is your TC40 fraud data. So to dive into this a little bit deeper, TC40 fraud data is basically your the amount of chargebacks that are actually coming in that are based on the reason fraudulent. So you would be able to see a percentage of those. The lower the percentage, the better your VAMP ratio would be, and I can dive into VAMP ratio in this as well. Um, but that's basically where you'd be able to see a lot of this. You go into chargeback alerts, or you go into this alert section here, you would be able to see a breakdown of your coverage. Again, you could change the date time frame based on your preference here. You would see a Visa coverage, a MasterCard coverage, your American Express coverage, and Discover coverage. A point to note here is in most situations, American Express and Discover coverage is comparatively lower. Um, that's because most processors have like a shared bin and cade for American Express and Discover across various different stores. So the coverage is comparatively lower. Not to say that there's no way of improving that coverage, but we could obviously dive into that and see how we could improve that coverage as well. So you will be able to see there. You can actually see your overall chargeback ratio with alerts and without alerts in this section also. sort of helps identify similarities or issues there. You will actually be able to see which chargeback alert feature is picking up more alerts as compared to the other. And again, this is not something that you or Disputifier can control. It's just the fact that it enables you to understand, or it gives you the ability to understand where exactly your coverage is better. A month-to-month coverage is broken down here. Visa, this will basically show you your alerts that are coming in per card brand. So if it's Visa, MasterCard, you can actually see your dispute percentage based on that. And you can see your coverage along with that as well. We move over to chargebacks. Over here, you actually be able to see the total chargebacks or total actual chargebacks that have come in. These are obviously chargebacks that have come in that were not prevented by alerts, right? So remember, alerts provide about 90 to 95% of coverage. So there's a chance that some might still slip through. You will be able to see a breakdown of the reasons for those chargebacks. You can actually see the status of those chargebacks as well. So if Disputifier is responding to all of your chargebacks, technically you would want to see a good, healthy win ratio, right? So a good, healthy win ratio would be anything above 50%. But it would actually help you identify, hey, if we've lost certain chargebacks, why are we losing them? Is it too many fraud chargebacks that are coming in? Is it too many product not received chargebacks that are coming in? Is that something that we need to speak to our supplier about and improve on shipping timeframes and stuff like that? So all that good stuff can be actually monitored here. If you're somebody that's selling in various different locations, so you can actually see um, where chargebacks are coming in from more based on the transaction amount. So if you're a store that's selling in the US and the UK, for instance, right? And if you've got 10,000 orders coming in from the US, and if you've got, two chargebacks out of those 10,000 orders, you're in a win-win situation. But on the other hand, if you've got 1,000 orders in the UK and you've got, say, 10 chargebacks that come in from 1,000 orders, that obviously means that there's something wrong with the UK market. They might not be as receptive as to your product. There might be shipping issues influencing that, getting the product over to the UK. Or the fact that you might just need to actually change your strategy in terms of those ads, right? On your end. You can also see chargebacks per product. So there's certain merchants that have like landing pages that are dedicated to a specific product or a specific offer. So if that SKU is technically associated with that landing page, and you're seeing that there's a higher chargeback ratio or higher chargebacks that are coming in, alerts that are coming in based from that SKU, that could possibly mean that there's some lack of clarity on that SKU that you can improve to reduce those chargebacks, to improve that overall visibility for customers, and they will probably be a lot more receptive to that and reduce the chances of doing chargebacks. Here's the dispute section. So this dispute section would actually show you all of your chargebacks that have actually come into the store. It will give you a breakdown of the processor. It will give you the order number. If that processor is associated with us, if it's integrated with us, you'll be able to see there. The reason for that chargeback, when the chargeback came in, the due date for that chargeback, the total amount for that dispute, the customer name, and their email address, you'll be able to see here. We're probably one of the few apps that would allow you, or probably one of the only apps that would actually allow you to add in additional evidence if you need. So, and the reason why we do that is because we might need to have, maybe communication from the customer. Maybe we don't have, a photograph of the signed delivery, right? We might not have a photograph of that signed delivery, or a photograph of the product actually being delivered to the customer's doorstep, because certain tracking information does do that. So if you need to add in any additional evidence, you can actually upload that file, add in any of this, and give a brief explanation of why exactly you're adding that evidence. Maybe, a simple scenario here would be, maybe you've actually gotten a customer that's reached out to your support team, and they've mentioned that they are not satisfied with the product, right? And your support team is negotiating with them. And it turns out that the same day, they've actually opened up a chargeback for product unacceptable. So in that situation, that specific scenario is contradicting the reason for the chargeback, right? And you could obviously add in that proof of communication, and as an explanation, you could probably say, hey, this chargeback contradicts the communication that we had with this customer on the same day that the chargeback was open. They mentioned that they have not received the product. However, it turns out that they they said that the product is unacceptable. So and we would obviously incorporate those within our response. We would obviously incorporate that evidence within that response if it is required. We obviously review every single chargeback that comes in, and we respond to them 2 to 4 days before they're due. So that gives us ample time to be able to leverage the due date to be able to make sure that everything is there to maximize the chance of winning, right? So that's basically where you'd be able to see that. You could also see in certain situations like this, right? You have these marks here that would probably be alert. So when you see an alert here, that obviously means that chances are that the package was lost in transit, or at least that's what the tracking is showing from Shopify. We leverage Shopify's tracking information, so maybe that tracking is showing us lost in transit, or there's an alert on that where it's damaged in transit, or you probably will notice something that says it's still in transit but it's been in transit for a while. So it's kind of pointless for us to respond to a chargeback when it's still in transit. Instead, it makes sense to leverage the due date to be able to maximize the chances of winning there. Um, and then you go into chargeback alerts. Um, this is basically where you'd be able to see all your alerts active, right? And if for any reason you've changed your payment processor, or your Shopify payment was probably, say, a Hong Kong account initially, or Hong Kong Shopify payments, and then you've changed that over to, say, a US entity. In that situation, you would obviously have to provide us with a newer ARN, right? And that ARN can actually get added here. Um, or if your processor doesn't have an ARN available, you could probably add in a bin and a CADE for us to actually submit that for enrollment for RDR. Same thing with Ethica. If you have a different payment processor, you can actually go ahead and comma space and then just add in the new processor here and click on submit. So we can actually proceed with enrollment. And at that point in time, even though your alerts were active on the previous descriptor, right? Because of the fact that the newer one has been added, you will see this move in from active to in progress the way it is. And so that's basically where you'd be able to make sure that there's continuous coverage for whatever processors you're using. Or if you've changed your store from, say, xyz.com to abc.com, that obviously means that in most situations Shopify would go ahead and change your billing descriptor as well, right? So in that case, you would have to provide us with the new billing descriptor for CDR and an Ethica, not for RDR, because RDR is enrolled based on your ARN, and that remains the same, right? You would actually see how many chargebacks were stopped, your coverage there as well, and then a breakdown of your costs for everything there. You can actually view all the alerts in this section here, right? So this is basically where you can actually see all the alerts. Now, in certain situations, you can actually see an order number, and the order number would obviously automatically populate because you've got Shopify integrated. If it's not Shopify, you'd have WooCommerce or some form of CRM that's integrated, and so we're picking that up from there, right? We're picking up the reason from there as well. But in certain instances, you might not see an order number, and that generally happens with tokenized transactions like Ethica, like Apple Pay, Google Pay, and Shopify payment or Shop Pay, where it's not an actual card that's being used to place the order. They actually use an email address on your website when they place the order. And once that email address that email address at the back end is obviously linked to an account that has a card number, but it's not technically them going ahead and going onto your checkout page and punching in a card number and, placing an order. So coverage to those are comparatively lower. And if they do come through RDR in most situations, or even in Ethica, you will not see an order number there. At that point in time, you would have to go ahead and search that order up in your store. You could use the transaction date. You could use the transaction amount. And you could also use the authorization code to verify if this is the right transaction. So, maybe in a subscription-based business, if you have 1866, if you've got multiple different orders that are on the same value, it might become a little bit difficult to be able to locate those. But transaction date, transaction amount for that same time frame, and then basically having to go through the authorization code in Shopify, and the timeline of that order would be able to to show you what that order is. So in the first video, I actually mentioned that it's extremely important for merchants to have an extremely unique descriptor. Otherwise, what could possibly happen is that if my store and your store share the same or a similar name, you are enrolled in alerts and I'm not enrolled in alerts, right? But because Ethica and CDR are enrolled based on the billing descriptor, chances are that your store might end up getting alerts from my store. So that would be like a situation where you're having to pay for alerts that are not technically yours. Now, if that descriptor was unique, that would obviously eliminate the chance of that happening. But here's what Disputifier has actually done to ensure that you do not, you know, you're not necessarily wasting money technically. So if there's an alert that comes through, say for instance, is this one, right? It will come through. You're obviously paying for it, but it will automatically get flagged as can't find by the system. When this gets flagged as can't find by the system, this automatically gets sent over to the credit section, right? So in the credit section is where we take the opportunity to reach out to Ethica or CDR and basically say, hey, you know what, so-and-so store received an alert. This wasn't associated with their store. Can we get credit back for it, right? So Ethica obviously does their verification. The verification takes about 30 days to 60 days. You do have an approved estimated time frame here as well. So once that estimated time frame is complete, or even before that, if it's complete, this gets credited back over to you for any future alerts that might be. So for this one, this demo store, you're looking at two alerts that are obviously this merchant would not have to pay for two alerts because the credit has already been added there. The other aspect of things, or the way the credit section would work is if you receive an alert for a transaction that's already been refunded, and that can possibly happen. There's a minor chance of that happening, but that happens because chances are that you refunded an order today, right? And the chargeback was filed, say tomorrow, or the chargeback was filed the same day because in certain instances, it takes about 3 to 5 business days for a bank to actually process a refund. There's technically no way to stop that. But because our system is designed to pick that up, if we see that order automatically, or if we see that that order has been refunded before, we're going to add that to the credit section so we can actually go ahead and refund you for that, right? So that's how it works in terms of credits. And then you have the ability as a merchant to automatic or to turn off the automatic refund feature. Now, again, this is not typically recommended because the whole idea is for you not to do that legwork. The whole idea here is for you to be able to focus on bigger things than just chargebacks and disputes, like growing the business, ad spend, all the other good stuff that should be there to acquire new customers. So but you can actually go ahead and turn off automated refunds for Ethica and CDRN. This feature is not available for RDR. RDR refunds happen on a processor level, so you're not able to turn those off. But what you can do is you can actually add a maximum value for those RDR alerts. So say if your average order value is say $100, you can actually set a threshold for about $120. So anything below $120 will automatically get refunded by RDR. But on the other hand, anything above that will not get refunded by RDR. You would have the opportunity to be able to review those alerts. And the issue here with all this would be where you would have literally about 24 hours to make a decision in regards to that alert that you receive. So if you don't refund that, it will become a chargeback, with generally within 24 to 48 hours. So to avoid that from happening, we generally recommend not setting any sort of a threshold, not turning off the automated refund, but I leave that up to you guys to decide. We also have the ability to be able to cancel subscriptions and blacklist customers, specifically for merchants that use Recharge, Data AI, Checkout Champ, Sticky, and a multitude of other subscription platforms. So you could obviously turn that on, but when you do turn that on, make sure that you provide us with relevant access, so we're able to perform that function to our to the best capability. And this is how this sort of benefits subscription customers because you receive a chargeback alert. If you're not going to you've obviously gone ahead and refunded that. But if you're not going to go ahead and cancel that subscription, that customer is obviously going to come back or get charged the next month. It's going to become another chargeback alert, so you get billed again. So it's like, this helps reduce that cycle of chargeback, refund, etc. We do also have the benefit to refund retrievals. Now, retrievals typically work on Discover cards. So customers have the ability to open up a retrieval before it actually escalates to a chargeback on Discover. So if you turn on this feature, that basically means anybody that's trying to open up a chargeback for Discover will actually, and if it's a retrieval rather than a direct chargeback, that retrieval will get refunded, and you would obviously see a better coverage in terms of Discover chargebacks there. Refund full orders regardless of full amount. Now, basically, what this covers is that if you're using something like AfterSell, for instance, right? If with AfterSell, if you have a certain customer that places an order, right, they have multiple different line items that show up in Shopify. So Shopify, along with many other processors, recognize each line item as a separate transaction because you're using AfterSale, right? So you by turning this on, this basically means that if a customer opens up a chargeback for one of the upsell items, for instance, we will refund the complete order. Now, this would obviously benefit you in a way where you're actually going to be paying for one alert, right? However, if if you didn't have this on, if you didn't turn this on, um, since Shopify is recognizing each transaction as a separate line item, if a customer does a chargeback, that each line item would be considered a separate chargeback. If you have chargeback alerts on, each chargeback will be considered a separate chargeback alert. So technically, for one order, if you've got four line items, you're having to pay for four different alerts, right? So if it's RDR, so you're paying $17, $17, $17, and another $17 for that same order. So this would eliminate a lot of those costs on that side of things. But this also can be, they could be a downside to this where, maybe a customer is just doing a chargeback on one of the upsells and they're fine with, three of the other parts of the order, right? But because you've actually turned this on, Disputifier will go ahead and refund all parts of that order. So that's where it is. Other than that, if you notice any coverage, issues, for instance, right, you can actually review the coverage section here. You can actually review what your coverage has been like over the last 30 days. You can actually see a Visa coverage, MasterCard coverage, American Express, and Discover coverage. You'll actually see a little bit of data here. And what's more important is basically a breakdown of your chargebacks that are not caught by alerts, right? So I mentioned American Express and Discover offer a comparatively lower coverage, right? But there's obviously a way of how to improve that. I mentioned this in my last video. But in this video, I could show you what you could do to be able to do that. And before we do that, you can actually see how you can actually improve your coverage as you go. So not only do you have the order number, you actually have the processor here. You also have whether the card was a Visa card, whether it was a MasterCard, whether it was a Shopify payments, whether it was tokenized like Google Pay or anything else of that sort. You'll be able to see that. But this section here would also give you a reason of why that chargeback wasn't stopped by alerts, right? And then it would also give you a solution of how you could possibly improve that coverage. So there are certain instances where we've seen Visa cards slip through. And the reason why that happens is maybe because their ARNs were too old, right? So we actually had the merchant add in a couple of new ARNs. We sent that over for enrollment, and that improved that coverage overall, right? Or chances are that somebody's changed their billing descriptor, right? So and we weren't informed about it, and neither did they actually update the billing descriptor in Shopify, in the app directly. So in that situation, what happens is that we see a comparatively lower coverage. So the merchant would obviously have to either provide us or add the newer billing descriptor in the app so we can actually cover transactions for that as well. So moving over to alert configuration. So what you could do here in the Amex section is add in the enrollment for American Express, right? You can actually select the MID that you're looking to enroll with. You add your Amex SE number. Now, the Amex SE number is generally provided by your payment processor. Shopify generally doesn't necessarily provide the Amex SE number, so there's no way to actually cover those. But if you're using something like Stripe or any other payment processors, you can get the Amex SE number. You add in your corporation name, you add in your DBA name and the corporation address. and you click on submit, and you're able to actually submit this. This takes about 14 days to go live, and you probably see better results in about a month or so. Same thing with Discover. You add in your Discover SE number, and you could basically add that there. So you could. This is where you can actually go ahead and enroll with Order Insights and Compelling Evidence as well. So Order Insights and Compelling Evidence is one of the newer features that we have. But basically, this allows us to Disputifier to be able to gather data on customers that place an order with you, and have actually done a chargeback for, say, fraud. Right, we're able to backtrack any of their previous transactions across millions of different stores within our network. We're able to pull up information such as if they placed orders on any other stores within a certain time period, if they did chargebacks on those stores, what was the reason for those chargebacks, if there's like a trend of them placing orders, opening up chargebacks on multiple different stores, we're able to send that back to Visa, and we're able to have that withdrawn from your VAMP ratio. We provide them with sufficient evidence to be able to actually say, hey, you know what, this business is legitimate. However, this customer is actually taking the system for a ride. And we should not necessarily be, or you guys should not be considering this towards the VAP ratio for this merchant, right? And then we're also one of the few chargeback apps, or I think probably the only chargeback app that offers PayPal alerts, right? So even though this one says coming soon, you can actually go ahead and set this up. Right? So you can actually click on enable PayPal alerts right here, right in the settings section. You could set that to 1 day before, 2 days before, immediate, right? You could also set a threshold for this amount. Now, what exactly does this mean? So on PayPal, especially for people that are using PayPal other than through Shopify payments, right? PayPal gives customers the ability to be able to open up inquiries before it actually becomes a dispute or a chargeback, right? Now, that doesn't necessarily work in every single scenario, but if a customer opens up an inquiry, rather than that moving over to a dispute stage or a chargeback stage, you have the ability to refund that a day before it becomes a dispute, 2 days before it becomes a dispute, or immediately. So you don't want to take that headache and you want to go ahead and refund that completely there and then, right? But this would not work in situations where a customer has opened up a dispute or a chargeback directly. So if they supersede the inquiry stage, right, there's not going to be we're not going to be able to stop that from becoming a chargeback, right? But Disputifier can go ahead and respond to that, irrespective of what the payment processor is. Then we move over to the ratio section. The ratio section will actually show you a breakdown of what your chargeback ratio is per mid. If you're a merchant that's using multiple different processors, you can actually go ahead and add a mid here. You put in a mid alias. So say, for instance, this merchant that I'm currently showing an example of is using Shopify payments, and they're also using Air Wallets at the same time, right? So that they're looking to integrate Air Wallets. So what they would do is they would actually put in the alias as Air Wallets. They will put in the descriptor that they have as Air Wallets. They would put in their Visa ARN. If a Visa ARN is not available, they would add in the BIN, CADE, and merchant category code, and they would actually fill out this information and click on save. So this new mid can actually get enrolled for chargeback alerts. But bear in mind, for chargeback alerts to actually work and for us to actually enroll you with services, it is necessary that any payment processor, any gateway that you're using, should be integrated with Shopify. Oh, sorry, should be integrated with the app itself. And you go into settings for that, and then you click on integrations. You will actually see that there's a ton of different integrations, ton of different processors, CRMs that we can integrate with. Most of them have actually got tutorial links. For those that don't have tutorial links, it's pretty simple to go ahead and set them up, because all it requires is for you to actually send us a user invite for that payment processor, right? The invite can be sent to onboarding@disputifier.com. It can be sent to hello@disputifier.com. For something similar to like Maverick, for instance, right? Maverick doesn't necessarily recognize, or Zen Payments, for instance. These guys, you would not be able to send an email to onboarding@disputifier.com or hello@disputifier.com. It would have to be something like onboarding plus, if your store name is Disputifier Demo, it will be onboarding plus Disputifier Demo at disputifier.com, right? Or if it's like, you know, say it'll be onboarding plus whatever your store name is at disputifier.com to be able to send that for to be able to ensure that we actually receive an invite. So AirWallets can be integrated here, and then going back to fraud blocking. So fraud blocking is a very essential feature, especially given the current landscape in terms of Visa and VAMP ratios. Um, Here's where you would actually be able to set your sensitivity level of what you want to allow to come through, or what you want to be alerted for and what you don't want to be alerted for. The medium sensitivity is basically what we recommend in most situations. Um, and the way it works is like you have the ability to obviously turn on or off the auto refund feature. We typically recommend leaving this on, and the reason why we do this is because the goal here is to prevent your store from any chargebacks, to make sure that Disputifier is your one-stop shop for literally everything chargebacks, right? So we're able to actually dive into metadata, again, leveraging millions of stores within the network that we have to be able to gather data on various different transactions that come through to your store, right? You can actually see those transactions here. You can actually see a review of those scenarios here as well. Obviously, this is a test scenario, but you could review every single, um, you know, transaction that comes in. Uh, Whether you turn on auto refund or whether you leave that on, to be able to take action on your end here, right? So this one here is refunded. It would obviously show you a little bit of a scenario here, but what this would do is, before, like, chargeback alerts would obviously work in situations where the customer has initiated a chargeback and the bank is sending us a message through RDR, Ethica, and CDR. But in this situation, this would be done before a chargeback alert even comes through for fraud orders specifically. So what you're doing here is you're actually um, we're scanning those orders for you, and you're refunding that order before it even gets shipped out, before it even gets fulfilled. um, so it saves you from that financial loss where you're actually shipping out that product, and then it's being delivered and you find out that, hey, it's a fraud order. Whereas with chargeback alerts, there's really no way to determine whether an order is fulfilled or unfulfilled, or whether it's delivered or not delivered, because chargeback alerts don't technically differentiate um, between the fulfillment status of the order. The goal there is to reduce your chargeback ratio, because a chargeback is going to come in. The goal with fraud blocking is to reduce your chargeback ratio because metadata that Disputifier has actually used has determined that this is potentially fraud, and you should actually be refunded here. And then shipping updates. Shipping updates is another important feature that we've got. So these Disputifier is able to scan your orders in your store. It's able to identify certain details, such as if an order is not fulfilled in 5 days, what exactly are you going to do, right? Um, Not only will you receive an email basically letting you know that, hey, you need to reach out to your supplier or you need to speak to your shipping department and get this order fulfilled as soon as possible. But this would also send out an email over to a customer to be able to let them know that, hey, we're working on your order. A lot of chargebacks happen because of the fact that customers are not necessarily, there's a communication lapse at some point in time. So this actually fulfills that communication lapse. Um, each of these scenarios here can actually be edited, or emails can be edited based on what you feel is the right scenario here. Some brands that work with us have, like, more brand voice. They've got a more salesy sort of a template that they add. Some of them don't leverage the 5-day feature, they leverage the 7-day feature, or some of them leverage the 10-day feature. It depends on what your preferences are. And we basically go ahead and send that out. And the advantage, or the best way of doing this, would be obviously by verifying your domain with us, so that all emails that get sent out are actually sent out through hello@disputifier.com, or as it shows here, get sent out by your email address, right? Otherwise, what's going to happen is we will still send the emails, but because we're using Brevo as our email service provider, it will be hello@disputifier.brevosend.com. It won't be a more personalized sort of an email that would go out. That could potentially affect deliverability as well. So if it's your email address it doesn't affect deliverability. The same goes for the notification section here. So if you verify your domain, any emails that go out to customers are relevant uh, to your email address. And then obviously you can go into the notification section. You could select whatever notifications you feel are needed for your line of business. So by default on this one, we've actually turned off the new RDR alert, new CDR alert, and new Ethica alert feature or notification off to come to our email address. But on the other hand, if you're somebody that wants to get notified, you could turn these on. You could actually go ahead and toggle on or off anything based on your preference. And that's it. And then we go into the settings section, and this is basically the template. You don't necessarily need to do anything on the template section. However, it is because obviously what we do is we pick up all the templates directly from your Shopify store because we're integrated with Shopify. But on the other hand, there's certain situations where you might want to actually go ahead and add in your template. So you can add in a screenshot of your refund policy. If you're a subscription-based business, you can add in your subscription cancel policy of your terms and service, your checkout page. If you're somebody or a store that's using, say, Parcel Panel, for instance, right, or you're using a unique tracking link, rather than us sending the tracking link that's already showing up in Shopify, if you could add in, your tracking link here without the tracking number, we can actually leverage that in our responses. We can leverage that in terms of letting the customers know, or when we're responding to the bank, we can actually go ahead and let everything know. You could add in your shipping from address. So for merchants that are actually shipping out through China, right, for drop shippers, the shipping address that will be picked up in the chargeback response template that we add will be the one that shows up in Shopify. In most situations, it's your home address. It's probably your business address that you don't necessarily want visible to customers. So you can actually go ahead and change your shipping address here, and we can actually go ahead and add those there. The responses section, you don't need to add anything here. The integration section I've already been through, but you could literally integrate anything and everything here. If you don't see a processor that's listed here, you can actually add in a custom processor here for us to do that. And one thing that we're extremely curious or cautious about is billing, right? Just like we don't want to overpay anybody, we don't expect anybody to overpay us, and we want to be completely transparent when it comes to billing. Um, when you click on the plan and billing section, you can actually see a breakdown of what you're signed up for. So these two features can automatically, or you could actually turn these off there and then. When it comes to chargeback alerts, you can turn them off over here because that is a little bit more complex because that requires us getting involved and us reaching out to Ethica and Verify to be able to disable those services on your behalf. The disablement process takes about 3 to 5 business days, generally sooner, but that's the rough estimated time frame that I'm giving you here. And then you can actually see a breakdown of all your invoices and charges right here. And again, if it's on Shopify, you get billed based on Shopify's billing cycle. If it's direct billing, you obviously get a weekly invoice from us that will help you gain a lot more clarity on everything else. Let me know if you have any further questions. Please drop a question in the you could obviously drop a question in the chat at the bottom, in the comment section at the bottom, or you could reach out to Disputifier support team through the live chat option on the website directly. Thank you.